I think things started to notice me that I was leaving. And because of that, I started to get visitations by different types of being in that space, whatever that space is. We can call it the astral world or whatever dimension. Um, for me, it's just the place you go when you leave your body.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Welcome everybody to Higher Journeys. I am so excited today because finally, at long last, I get to have somebody who I've actually known for quite a few years now, but has not been on the show, Jason Quitt. I have to tell you, Jason, I think I'm having a bit of a Mandela effect because there's a part of me that feels like you have been on this show before. Am I talking about another timeline or what?
I think that when we've gotten together in person, we kind of get into this whole mix of things. So that, just us talking in person is like a show.
It
So
could
maybe
be.
that's it. Yeah.
It could be. Maybe I had secretly pressed record and secretly produced it and played. I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about, journeyers, Mandela effects. Maybe we'll talk about that too. Look, we got a whole bunch to handle today. And I was saying to Jason, Jason's got a brand new book out called Egyptian Postures of Power, Mysticism, Movements, and Meditations. We're going to get into that more toward the latter part of the show, Jason, but I want to make this sort of a long prelude as to why this book is going to be so important for those of us watching and listening today. That has to do with some of the more shadow aspects of reality that, whether we like it or not, many of us are dealing with. We're talking about this idea of dream, what I'm calling infiltration, shadow being phenomena, of which is ubiquitous, I feel, as well as what I'm calling the matrix overlay. Those are three very heavy concepts. Some of you may be saying, I don't think so. Others of you may be saying, I understand because I'm going through some of that now. Jason, I want to begin at the beginning for you because I know you haven't been on the show before. I know a lot of you know your story, but for those that don't, perhaps you could give, as best you can, an abbreviated version of your sojourns into this other world and some of this that you have gone through. And then we'll kind of graduate into some of these themes that we're going to touch on. So I'm going to let you have at it.
Sure. I would just say that I've been having these experiences my whole life. My earliest memories are memories of leaving my body or past lives, or having a shadow figure in my room as a child, which would stand in the closet. And, you can call it like a typical poltergeist type of thing where as a child, I would be very scared to go to sleep, obviously. And I would make sure my closet door was closed. It was right in front of my bed. So I had full view of this closet. And at nighttime, this closet would open up by itself, get very scared. And when I peered into the closet, there would be a figure in there that I really couldn't make any detail out of. It looked like a shadow with form. And I'll jump right ahead until my early 20s when this really started to pick up. And it started with a sleep condition called sleep paralysis, where I'd be laying in bed at night, or not laying in bed, I'd be sleeping at night. And suddenly I'd be awoken out of a dream or out of a sleep, and something wouldn't be right. I would be frozen. My body would be completely paralyzed in bed. And the only thing that I can do at that moment is basically use my mind to basically try to scream or will my body to wake up. These are very scary experiences. And scientists say that basically there is a percentage of the population that does experience this at least once in their lifetime. And what they say, it's a mechanism in the brain that shuts the body off while you're dreaming so that you don't physically act out your dreams while you're sleeping. So it's a physical mechanism that we all have. But for me, this was happening. It started to happen quite often. And I started to get very, not only scared, but comfortable in these conditions because it was happening so much. And I started to get this kind of sense that I wasn't alone in the room when these events were occurring. So I could kind of feel something in the room with me as I start going into the sleep paralysis. So obviously, your mind goes into panic and fear. And because, we all grow up with TV and the movies and sci-fi, I automatically thought this was like alien abduction or demonic possession. So obviously I became very religious very quickly. I started to pray all the time because I thought that that was the answer to get me out of this. But something else happened is that when I was in these sleep paralysis conditions, it felt like I had two distinct bodies at that moment. My physical body became like my sarcophagus, my tomb. And I had this other body within my body. And the interesting thing about this is that my other body inside, I could move it around. So I can feel myself kind of shifting inside my physical body, kind of banging like in a tomb to wake up or to get out. And one night I just completely had enough of this, and I was like screaming in my body to wake up. I was, shuffling back and forth inside to try to wake myself up. And I shook so hard that I popped myself out of my body. And this, I would say, would be my first out of body experience in this type of scenario. And it was exactly like what people describe in a near-death experience. I popped out of my body. I was above the bed. I looked down. I could see myself laying down in the bed. I was straight as a board on my back. And the freaky thing is my eyes were opened in the bed. So, but then I realized that I wasn't alone in this scene. And at the foot of my bed, there was a tall shadow-like being that I could only describe as what people describe a Grim Reaper looking like. It was this giant shadow that looked like it was wearing a dark cloak. It wasn't holding a sickle or anything. It was just this figure. And almost immediately, the reality set in that did I just die? You hear all these stories. I'm out of my body. I'm looking at myself and I see this figure in the room just standing there. That moment was a real dose of reality. And it scared me so much that I actually got sucked right back in my body. And, I woke up with my heart pounding. And then after that experience happened, my sleep paralysis ended. It was like leaving my body was the moment that sleep paralysis ended for me. But since that moment, it was like a door opened up for me. And that door was the access to being able to leave my body again. I knew what it felt like. I knew how to kind of, in astral travel, they call it like rolling out. I knew how to kind of push myself or will myself out of the body. And by having that experience, the interesting thing is it wasn't just terrifying. It was almost like getting a glimpse of another reality that was more real than this reality. And ever since that happened to me, there's this fire of curiosity that always made me want to do it again. It's like you get like a taste of it and you're saying to yourself, well, I know it's not a dream. I know I'm not hallucinating. This is like a smack in the face of reality that I've never experienced. I have to attempt to do it again. And that's what I started to do. And the interesting thing is there are certain moments where you're falling asleep. And it's almost like the body starts to shut down. So you start going through these stages of going to sleep. And there's a stage between waking and dreaming, or waking and sleep. And it's a very small window, but it's like in that window, the body shuts down. So it enters into its own paralysis, let's say, because your body does it naturally. But the mind is aware, and suddenly the astral body or the ka body, whatever you want to define it as, has this moment of awakening. So if you can kind of connect in that short window of time and then push yourself out, you can have this experience. And this is what people explain in astral traveling or leaving their body. So I started to practice this, and it worked. I was able to do it. But I was very fearful, very fearful, because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I went too far away from my body, or if I stayed out too long, would I be able to come back? Or someone is just going to say, oh, Jay died in his sleep. So that was always a fear in the back of my mind. So at first, I would just stay in my room. I wouldn't venture out anywhere. I would just kind of stay in my room. And it's a very different experience. A lot of people describe it like as a body, and you have this cord. I did not experience that.
You didn't see the cord. I was going to ask you about that.
No, I didn't see the cord, which made me even more fearful.
Right, because it's believed that the cord is what keeps us somewhat tethered to this reality and alive. Yeah,
yeah. So I never have seen that. Maybe it's just me, or I don't know. I've never seen that. But it's weird because I don't know if the mind controls it, because when you're out of your body, it's like you're a field. All right. That's the only way I could describe it. It's like a field, an orb type of thing. You have 360 vision. You can't speak. All right. You're not breathing. It's a completely different way of experiencing whatever that world is. You can like zoom in and out of things. So let's say there's something across the room, let's say like a crystal. Just by me putting my attention there, suddenly it's like a zoom. So I could like zoom right into it and keep going as far into that crystal as I want. And then I can zoom back out. An interesting thing is you don't necessarily have to leave your body to have this sight. And I was practicing this a lot. Basically, I could be sleeping in bed and I could feel like a presence or an entity or a shadow, whatever you want to call it, enter the room. It was almost like there was this thing that awakened in me where it was like a security guard. So my astral sight or body could just stick its head up out of the body. So I don't have to leave. But as I'm sleeping with my head in the pillow and I notice something, it's like I could tune into that 360 vision while sleeping and look around the room to see who's there. And if it's something that has to be dealt with, then I can step out completely, but I can just kind of peer out just a little. So there's all these little nuances of learning how to do this. So back to, I didn't want to leave my room, and over time, the only thing I can say is, I think things started to notice me, that I was leaving. And because of that, I started to get visitations by different types of being in that space, whatever that space is. We can call it the astral world or whatever dimension. For me, it's just the place you go when you leave your body. Nobody in that world has ever defined it for me. They've never said this is this dimension or this is that dimension. I've never heard any names associated to these places. And these beings would come to me, and at first they wouldn't speak to me. There's no communication whatsoever. They looked like invisible. How do I describe this? It's like you can see the outline of them. It's almost like the movie Predator, where it's like you can kind of see the outline of their structure, but you can't really see them. It's almost like they're invisible.
Like a silhouette, right?
Yeah.
That's
But it's not a shadow. Not a shadow. It's like, yeah, like just a silhouette. And at first, these are the first type of beings that started to come to me, and they would take me out of my body. And I could use the word forcefully because I didn't have a choice. All right. So I could be sleeping, dreaming, or whatever condition I was in, and then suddenly I'd feel something reach for me, yank me out. So I wasn't projecting myself. I was literally being pulled out of my body.
Were you resisting, Jason, when this was at this stage of it?
I couldn't resist. It was almost like I had zero power to do anything. And like I said, even when I was praying, it was still happening. So these were the first experiences. And what they would do is they would pull me out and they would shoot me up into outer space. And, I could see the planet. And then it's almost like that Google, Earth thing where it's like you see the planet and then you go right down into a location, to zoom in really, really fast. That's what it was like. And they would drop me off. So all I could say is they dropped me off in different locations on the planet. And when I would land, I would be experiencing or observing whatever was happening in that location they dropped me. And the only thing I could say is that was not our time.
What do you mean?
I mean, it was almost like what they were showing me has either happened in another timeline or it's a future timeline, because it's like showing like prophetic events, basically.
I see. Okay.
Luckily, I have not seen any of those things come true, which is great.
Can I stop you here, because you're giving us so much, and some of the things that you're saying I recall reading in your most excellent intro to this new book, Egyptian Postures of Power. This one I didn't even go any farther than that, because I'm like, this is a conversation. You mentioned that and maybe it wasn't even in the book, but a previous interview I saw of you where you talked about these beings showing you what would seem like prophetic events. This is where we may want to go right into the matrix, and forgive me, because I know you could go on just with your story forever, but I want to try to zoom in, if forgive the pun, on some of these elements and who's at the control panel, if you will, in terms of these beings. Let's, if we can, if it's not too soon, maybe segue to that a little bit. You are seeing these different events that appear to be real, perhaps another timeline, perhaps something that we would invariably see in our future, but were they? What are your thoughts on that? Was there someone at the control panel of these events?
These are the questions, obviously, I've been thinking about for 20 years, with no satisfying answers. And, there's things in the back of my mind where it's seeing destruction of the planet, seeing horrible things has an effect on you. And it's an effect that cannot be it's a life-changing effect. That's all I can say. It's like if you go to bed one night, you have these things happen to you. The next morning that you wake up, you're a different person. I mean, that night changed you forever. And I think if that's all it is, then that's even a huge impact as well,
Absolutely.
because I wasn't the same, and I was very scared, very fearful, um, because when we look at the world today, there is many indicators where the earth can go in that direction very easily. And I think that if there is an intelligence out there that is beneficial to us or is trying to help us see us through the future, they need to kind of show us what could happen if we enter those paths. Um, so for me, it is very realistic that those things that I saw could come to pass. Also, they can just be warnings, you know. But it really set me on this path of trying to understand what is going on, why we're not taught certain things, we're not told certain things. Things like these are demonized. Um, look, if you knew me before this, and then you knew me after this, it's quite the change in my life. And I think that's also part of the point, because it literally was a 360 or 180, I don't know, complete turnaround
Mm-hmm.
of my life to try to, it's like I was at the time, I was fresh out of college. I was with my best friend. We opened up a recording studio. I was having like the time of my life. Honestly, it was like, you go back to that time, like, oh my God, I did that life. And then suddenly all these things started to happen to me, and I left the studio. I left my profession, and I went into energy medicine. I went I took courses in energy medicine for 2 years. Then I went to start studying Algonquin shaman with a native medicine man here up in Ottawa. Like going from that to that, it was a complete twist. And this was in 2000, and I think I made the decision around 2004 to do that. And that was just before the time of YouTube. Okay. So, everybody's like getting their information from YouTube today. Um, what did I do? I went to Indigo Chapters, the bookstore basically, and I would go into the spiritual section and try to find any books that I possibly could that can try to explain, what was happening to me. So that's how I kind of got into this whole path.
Yeah, honestly. Before I lose this thought, I mean, this
Yeah.
is so rich, Jason, and I thank you so much and I can feel your sort of reliving this whole chronology of your life as you're talking. I hear it in your voice. This idea, let's see how I can ask this question. This idea of being by seeing something that could possibly or potentially be a future that's not too pleasant, as an example, you talk about how visceral an experience that is and how much that rocks your world. Now imagine, because there are a lot of other people, I think you probably know, that have reported similar events. In fact, it seems as if there's a sort of an uptick in these sort of prophetic type dreams lately. Not really a surprise with all that's going on, but nonetheless, imagine if all of those individuals having those dreams are being affected like you are emotionally. Here's my question. I'm going to just throw it way out. Being that we are tethered both to the earth and we are conscious creatures, could the emotional, how can I put this, the emotional state that this leaves us with could we be a catalyst in seeding the possibility of the play out of these things just by virtually experiencing it, grounding it with that emotion? I mean, I'm getting a little not conspiratorial, but controversial in terms of
Mhm.
the power that we wield without our even realizing it. I happen to feel that emotion moves things, can create realities and destroy them. Do you
Absolutely.
understand what I'm saying to you?
I do. It's almost like having an intelligence convince you the world is going to end, and then you say, well, what's the point? Let's end it anyways.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Or let's take the Sethian, philosophy. You create your own reality.
Yeah.
Well, if this is a catalyzing situation, if it's acting as the catalyst, we're creating that reality collectively, even subconsciously, subliminally, by virtue of
Yes.
our being the conduit or the catalyst, which would
Yes.
be pretty tricky.
And what really gets me about this is the whole type of apocalyptic type mindset that many mainstream religions have had for thousands of years. And basically saying that they're waiting for the Messiah to come. They're waiting for the second coming to come. And to do this, to have this type of apocalypse, this awakening, unveiling, basically the world has to be at the brink of disaster before there's any intervention. So you get religious zealots with a belief that basically to inflict as much conflict and chaos as possible to set off the prophecies to get um, the apocalypse to roll, and that is an extremely scary thought, that people actually believe that this is the way forward. So I think that this type of thinking has been with the human race for thousands of years. It's not just a few people getting these things. In fact, um, a lot of the things in the Bible are from dreams and prophecy. So it's almost like these same type of things happen generation over generation for thousands of years, and it has not stopped. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but I have to say that I did get those experiences to stop. So, and like I said, I when all these things are happening, that if you tell people, it's not good for you. All right. I remember telling a friend of mine what had happened to me and what I saw, like, the detail. And that person never looked at me the same again.
Hmm.
So like I knew that I couldn't express these things, because either people would think I'm crazy or just making this stuff up, or, why is Jay saying this stuff?
Yeah. Well,
You
yeah.
So there's also that type of emotional strain, because the world we live in, the views of people, and that what you're saying is unacceptable to the mass population. So I really did hold it back a lot, which was not good for my emotions and my mental state of being. But to get back to this whole concept of seeding this type of stuff in the human population, it's interesting because it depends on the person. It's almost like a test. It's like, I'm going to show something to you, and then I'm going to observe how you integrate that information.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because I know people who, let's say they were visited by an angel. Suddenly their entire identity is they are chosen by God. And suddenly they're on this mission, as Um, we don't know the reason behind that. But I think if I didn't have the background of what happened to me in my childhood, I think seeing those things, and it's not just a dream, like, people kind of confuse, okay, this is like a dream. No, this is not like a dream. This is something literally pulling you out of your body, out of a dream. So you're dreaming in bed, and suddenly, violently, something pulls you out and takes you, and you're conscious of it, and then leaves you somewhere, and you don't know what's happening, if you're here forever. Did they just leave you somewhere? Like, what's going on? So it's this whole mental, emotional thing of, this is not supposed to happen to you. All right. It's like, it just goes against your freedom, basically, or your will. But to get back to that, all it did for me was make me more sensitive to others. It made me more sensitive to my footprint on the earth. It opened me up to different ideals, so it had, even though it was a terrible experience, it changed me in a very positive way. Where if somebody else was taken the exact same as me, it could have ruined their life completely.
I don't think that's hypothetical, Jason. I think that has happened. And I have to just say, if I may just interject, as I'm listening to this incredible journey of yours, what I keep hearing is choice, choice, choice. Jason Quitt made the choice, rather to shove it under a rug, he decided to explore. Rather than shut it down, he decided to wield the power, whatever this is, to understand, because I think you knew and know intuitively that it is designed for you, Jason Quitt, to do just that, where others, and it's no fault of their own. Because I believe millions of people are having experiences similar to this. There's but this was yours to explore and hopefully help others to
And
have courage to explore as well.
Yeah. And it kind of makes me feel kind of bad in a way, because I do get a lot of emails from people telling me that things are happening to them similar ways or not so similar ways, but things are happening to them like this. And every person is an individual. There's no blanket answer for what's the truth to you. I can't tell you what's going to happen next to you. I can't tell you if it's going to be positive or negative, and it's kind of disheartening for me, because the only thing I can do is kind of share the road that I walked, and hopefully there's information in there that's usable for people that are going through that. That's the most I can do. And then I can give them the information that was given to me on how I could help myself, which we'll get into afterwards as well.
Absolutely. Well, this is a great time. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break, take a pause, everyone. Go grab a glass of water. Of course, you can press pause because this is pre-recorded. But when we come back from this short break, and I really now want to move into this idea of the infiltration or interference within the dreamscape. And I know that's a big one. It's related, but there's some nuanced differences there that I think there's a lot of me too. So when we come back from this break, on the other side of it, we're going to get into dream infiltration. You're watching Higher Journeys, and my guest, finally, is Jason Quitt. Be right back. If you're enjoying this episode, along with all of the subjects that we cover here on Higher Journeys, then I invite you to join our members-only community on Patreon, where we go even deeper into the conversations with the guests that you know and love. Not only does your membership ensure that we can keep this work going and growing, but you'll also get immediate access to our exclusive after shows. Get up close and personal with the guests of the show, along with many other member perks. So click on the link below to join now, or visit higherjourneys.com, where you'll find the Patreon link. We'll see you on the journey. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching or listening to Higher Journeys with my special guest, Jason Quitt. We're talking about the incredibly enigmatic world of, well, what would we call it? The anomalous, the the paranormal that is really normal. I heard you say something, Jason, in a 2019 interview where you said the paranormal is normal. What's not normal is the society that we are living in. What's not normal is the society that we're living in. You said that a little before the world turned upside down. What do you have to say now? That's not
Oh my, yeah.
right.
I say there's no more conspiracies anymore.
No,
The
well,
world has
certainly not
put,
theories.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we'll leave that there. But y'all know what we're talking about anyway. But this is not only Jason Quitt's normal, I have a feeling it's your normal too. What we're talking about today, dream infiltration, which we're going to get into right about now. This idea of the possibility of an overlay of matrix like reality, as well as shadow beings. They're all somewhat intertwined, Jason. I want to get into this idea of we have dreams every night. Many of us say we don't remember them, but some of the dreams that we do can be hellacious or just really bizarre. The idea that something or someone or some faction or some beings may be influencing our dreams, directing them, including taking us out of our body and plunking us down somewhere else in another timeline. How real is that for you? I want to get into that. How real is that for you?
For me, that's reality. And it's not just our dreams that are being influenced, it's also our thoughts and our ideas, and also our emotions are being played with. Um, and it's a very large subject. It's very complicated, and a lot of people have different ideas of the who, when, and whys of this. I'm going to try to break it down to how I understand it. And first, you have to understand, who you are. And they say that when you're born into this life, you take with you certain qualities, identities, memories from your past life to help give you experience. So that is innate. So you come into this life with this innate knowledge. And you also come in with the karma that you have accumulated, which is also experience. And then on top of that, your family gives you their lineage. So your family line, your ancestry, they pass down to you what they've been carrying as well. So you have your stuff, and now you have your family stuff to deal with. And this all makes up our energetic matrix, blueprint, or whatever you want to define it as. And then you come into this world and you have this kind of world mind, this collective consciousness. And that collective consciousness starts out with the family unit. So how do you identify with your family? Who's your family? And then what traditions and culture is passed down through that family? So you have your identity through your religion. So then that matrix is basically placed on top of you. And then on top of that, you have your nationalism. All right, where are you born? Are you American? Go USA, go Canada, whatever country you're in, you start to identify as the nation that you feel connected to. And then you, as the individual with these matrices around you, have to navigate through experience trying to find your own identity. So then through all of this stuff that's put on you, you're developing who you are through all these different, what you would call matrices. So that's a lot of different influences. Now, if we get spiritual here, and this concept, I view it as reality. Many people may say it's a psychological way of defining or explaining this. But our thoughts, our mind, let's call it a dimension. There's a dimension of the thoughts and the mind. And in this dimension, your thoughts could have manifestations. So let's say that you go through a wound or a trauma, and because of that memory, that emotion, that thought came together in that world, and you start to feed it with your emotions and your thoughts through life, you're creating this being. And this being could be a positive being, and it could be a negative being. Now, whatever type of being that these energies create seeks out the energies that created it. So if you have this being in the thought or mental sphere that you've been feeding fear to your entire life, this being will seek out others that give that same energy of fear. And this is, I think, where we get a lot of these stories of these entities from. They're created through our actual ability to manifest in these dimensions. And I know that there's more. I know there's, you can say ghosts or demons or this and that, but there are many different things, and many people just lump them all together as one force or one thing. But I'm seeing different. I'm seeing separation between these different things. And these things, to sustain their life, they need energy, just like everybody else. Everything in creation needs to feed or have a source to rely on to nurture whatever they are. So let's say you have these attachments or entities that are mental projections or manifestations of, let's say, anger. Okay, this being or entity is defined by the energy of anger. Well, what they will do, being attached to you, is whenever they're hungry, they will push your triggers. They will give you thoughts. They will put dreams or manipulate dreams where you start to get very angry. And the more angry you get, the stronger these entities become. And then it becomes like the puppet show. Who's really controlling who? But it's also the same on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. If you are, giving energy to peace and love and compassion and these things, you are creating a beneficial energy as well. So the whole aspect of this is we have to be responsible of how we think, how we feel, because we have to understand that anywhere you put your attention, that's where the energy is going to flow. So if you're just spending all day online looking at things that are getting you worked up, you're actually feeding that energy. You're feeding those beings that are connected to those energy fields. So we have to kind of choose where we want to give this. Now, just by being born in this world, you are placed in this type of fields of matrix of this collective consciousness. So we have the burden of the collective consciousness within us or connected to us. And we pick it up from our friends and loved ones, or even locations. We can pick these things up where we go. So when we start to awaken in that type of regard, we have to learn how to separate what is ours and what is not ours. What are we picking up and what comes from divine source within us? And that is where the true discernment comes from, where we have to kind of decide what we're going to feed and what we're going to starve. And this is why also in native or cultures around the world do fasting, because when you fast and go in solitude, what you're doing is you're weakening these attachments and entities around you to a point where you can let go of them and become stronger. Man, so there's just so much just in this one little point that we have to understand, because when we're presented with, let's say, an entity or something that's controlling our thoughts or our minds, we have to decide, are we going to give them that energy? Okay, that's the whole point, because the moment you make that decision where you get the thought, and instead of instantly reacting to it, getting emotional and acting out whatever that trigger was, that's like what they want to happen. Mm-hmm. So the moment you say, okay, I'm not feeding this, this is not me anymore, you're not my thoughts, you're not my energy, you know, I didn't ask for this and I'm not giving it, and you continue to do this, you're going to find that those thoughts and feelings will intensify because it's like a fight. You know, they're going to see how far they can push until you go into that trigger. But then they'll just either leave you alone or be gone completely, because they know that the food line is over for them.
Resource is gone. Right. Oh, brilliant.
You know, so and what I would do, which was taught to me by this gentleman in Edmonton, his name is Dennis Barnett. He taught me to say this mantra, which is my favorite mantra, which was, "You are not my thoughts, please leave now." And it's like, so whenever those weird things come to you, just out of nowhere, you get these weird thoughts or weird dreams. The second it happens, I know this is not me. This is something else. And I immediately put up that guard and say, "You are not my thoughts, please leave now. You are not my thoughts, please leave now." And then by doing that, something changes in you. Really, it's like, you know how most people I know, their minds are just constantly running. It's like they can't even sleep. Their just minds are just taken over by thoughts. And people have to understand that a thought takes energy. The moment you think, you're putting energy out. It's like you're sending your fishing line out into the universe. That's a thought. It takes energy to think. So if your mind is all over the place, you're like trying to get water in you and you have all these holes. So you'll never be fulfilled. You'll never feel whole when you have all these thoughts taking over your life. And by practicing and practicing, "You are not my thoughts, please leave now," and practicing the clear mind, like the Zen Buddhist meditations of just being present and just be here. Something happens where it's like a switch in your brain turns from one side to the other. And suddenly it's like wind going through ear to ear. And it's strange at first, because it's like you keep saying there's nothing going on in your mind. I remember growing up, if I was going to speak to somebody, before I would speak to them, in my mind, I would practice what I'm going to say to them. It's almost like I was preparing myself what to speak and say. And there was this whole connection with the mind of, I'm going to say this, and this is going to happen. And then I would, in my mind, see what would happen if this happened, and what if happened if this happened. So I'd overthink everything. And once this kind of thing happened to me, it's like I said, like with these interviews, is I try not to prepare for anything. I don't, because there's nothing going on up here, which sounds weird, but I'm not thinking what I'm going to say and just saying it. There's a very big difference. So it's like, as I'm speaking to you, my mind is completely clear, like flatlined. It's not going anywhere except speaking to you right here, right now. There's nothing else in the world.
I love it. I love it. Well, all interviewers take note, me included, or don't take note. Don't take notes anymore. I'm being a bit facetious. Wow. Jason, let's go back to where you started this explanation, this brilliant explanation, by the way. Thank you so much. One of the first things that I believe were saying is that initially when we come into this earth, we come in with a lot of baggage, definitely. But as we are going through the process of thought, there's some point, it seems, where we are creating these beings. We are creating, literally, it's been called thought forms. They've been called tulpas. I'm sure you've heard the term in ancient Tibetan Buddhism, the tulpa. Maybe even the shadow beings. I've often asked the question, you know how they say, oh, he's afraid of his own shadow. Could these entities that we consider to be external to us somehow be emanations from us that we're unaware of, being fed continuously by our own consciousness to sort of come back to us and, forgive the term, haunt us? I'm oversimplifying, but I've always been interested in that question. And the way you first described this gave me that idea that somehow we have something to do with the entities that are feeding off of us. What do you think?
No, I know that to be true. And what I'm going to say could be viewed as controversial, but this is literally what I've been dealing with for years and what I've learned from it. I was not expecting this to happen, because we've always been taught to fear these things. And this is later in the game. Like, I learned this later in the game. These shadows, it's not all, some of these shadows are pieces of yourself that have been broken off through trauma. A piece of you has been shattered. Let's say in a trauma, memory, thought, emotion, whatever it is. This little seed has grown because it's been fed this energy. And it becomes this kind of entity, attachment, or shadow. And when it comes to you, especially in the middle of the night, it's trying to get your attention. It's almost like a piece of you that you have ignored, pretended did not exist, or buried it deep within yourself to not look at this aspect of yourself. And this aspect of yourself is literally crying out to you to be integrated back within you, because it is you and it is a part of you. It's a part of you that you have put aside. So there are cases that I've experienced, and it's not just one time it's happened. I could probably count 10, 20 times that this has happened, where the shadow will, just like the scary movies, it'll climb up on top of you on bed, and it's this really heavy weighted, dark thing, and instead of fighting it, I put my arm around it and embrace it in love. I swear this is what I do. And when I have it and I put it in that love, it comes back to me. And when that happens, it's almost like an euphoric explosion of energy that is indescribable the power of and the beauty of the returning of this part of yourself. It's like this celebration. And like I said, this is only some cases, because, you know, I've had, let's say, a very dark, large energy come into the room where it's like it takes your breath away. You feel crushed. You know, it's palpable how heavy this energy is. And sometimes it's almost like this knowing of when to do what. And I don't know how I know it. It's an automatic response. But let's say that this is what happened for real. It's this being came, and I just knew, even though it was extremely hard to deal with it because it was so heavy, I knew I had to send healing to it. So in my state, I'm sending healing and healing and healing, and it won't leave. And I'm continually sending healing and healing and healing. And suddenly the shadow turned into somebody that I knew. And I saw them on the floor crying. And I realized that this was a trauma of a person I knew that's been crying for help, trying to get people's attention. And it's like, as I healed whatever that was, did that person change? And I think they did. You know, and it's not something I can say to that person. Don't tell them what happened.
No need.
But there's no need. It's just that. So there's this weird thing, because it looks like the shadow, it feels like the shadow, but there's this kind of inner knowing or discernment of what to do. Because, you know, there are some cases where these things come to you where, you know, it's like the tulpa, right? You know, it's like the hungry ghost, where it's, because I've seen entities that I could only describe as like literal mental illness. Like if that thing attached to you, you're not going to be well in the head, you know? And it's like when those things in some cases came to me, it's like instantly I knew I had to get rid of it, and not with love, not with pulling it in, not with healing. It's like I knew I had to kind of, I'll use the word destroy it, but do something to it, change
May I
it.
ask what you did in some cases?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's like there's not like one size fits all for everything. There's so many different things out there that have to be dealt with differently. And it's in knowing, or an innate knowing of going through it so many times, that you start to hone in on, well, if this is happening, do this. If this type of being comes to you, do this. You know, because this is where the whole thing with tricksters come into place, or entities or demons, because it's frustrating, because they've come to me as loved ones, because they can change their form. They've come to me as deceased relatives. No, they weren't them. They took the form of someone I loved. They've come in forms that look like angels. I've seen beings that look like shining, glittering light. Like, and that's what scares me the most, is that, you know, if someone that doesn't understand what's going on to them and doesn't understand these worlds, if they come in contact with a being like that, I'm afraid they'll start praying to it.
Yeah, we've heard this before. Yes.
And they don't understand that these things could take the form in an act of manipulation, to get at you some way. They want something from you, whatever that is, I don't know, or the reasons. But you have to be very, very cautious with everything. And the only thing I could say is, you know, I was told from the beginning, treat everything exactly the same. Okay. As in, keep your composure, stay neutral and just observe the situation. Don't let your beliefs or your mind get in the way of this is this and this is this. Okay, it's the only way, because like I said, these things can be very, very tricky.
Very tricky.
Very tricky.
Not one size fits all. My goodness, Jason.
Yeah.
We're gonna start to wind down. I can't believe close to an hour has gone by, but I want to ask you. Thank you again and again. This is just. I know the journeyers are going to find this so helpful, and yet this is such an individual journey. And through your example, I dare say everyone just follow what your heart says, but take an active role in trying to mete out what's happening and how to deal with it. Speaking of which, I have an audience question for you, if you don't mind.
Of course.
This person says, I absolutely have had beings interfere with my dreams, and mostly in the astral plane, if you will, shadow beings as well as human-looking beings. They appear and feel as real as as physical beings. I have not been able to find much information on this phenomenon. Well, obviously, we've been talking about aspects of this for the entire hour, but anything in specific you might say to this individual?
Yes. When it comes to these things, there's always a reason. Okay, there's always something within us that draws us to these things. For like the example I said before is like if you're carrying a seed of anger, for example, then you're inviting something that likes that energy towards you. The only way is to strengthen the energy field, is what I've been taught, is to heal. And when I mean heal, I'm not talking about, physical ailments here. I'm talking about a spiritual or energetic healing, where all of us, okay, this is with every single person, even gurus out there, okay, this is with every single person. We all carry, like you say, baggage. We all carry wounds. We carry things that trigger us. And that is like the anchor in us that these things could attach to. So instead of fighting the beings and saying, we could fight the rest of our lives. All right. Every night we can fight an entity and get rid of it. And then the next night there's going to be another entity. Why? Because we haven't taken care of ourselves. We have to find those things within us that are anchoring that type of connection. Be it a wound, a memory, a trauma, ancestry, lineage, you name it, the way you think, your emotions. If we can heal that aspect of ourselves, then these things don't have an anchor. They have nothing to grab onto anymore. So in my opinion, that is the greatest protection anybody can have, because instead of putting up shields, you just become invisible. Because putting up shield, it's like, okay, well, you're vulnerable. You have to put up a shield, but you just become not vulnerable.
Right. That could take a lifetime of work. Clearly.
Yes.
Not only is there not one size fits all, but it's not going to happen in a vacuum.
No,
So
but for me, that's the foundational concept of how we can move forward in this, is to find a way to let go of it. Because when this started happening to me, it was like all the time. Like there was a couple years of my life where it was like I was living in two worlds, and now I'm like in the normal world. And then if something happens, I get pulled into that world, so it's like, it's different. It's like the more you heal, the stronger you become physically, and these things start to stop happening. So I still have that connection to energy. I still have that connection to spirit, In fact, it's stronger now than ever. But to be pulled out of my body or to go places or deal with entities, that has kind of gone right down.
Okay, I was going to ask you, what would you say the last time you had an experience somewhat like this? When was the last time?
Maybe a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
It's still common, but it's not like an everyday occurrence. You know, and when it does happen, it's very simple. It's only, let's say, like 10 seconds, or, you know, it's a very fast thing where you just come in contact, whatever happens, and then you just go back to sleep. So for me, it's like, it's very minimized at the moment.
okay.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of work, my friend, at your young age. And I know that there's a long ways to go, but you've come so far. And I so hope for those of you listening that can relate on any aspect of this to watch this interview again and again. As a matter of fact, we're not done yet. We're going to wind down for today, but we're coming back, everyone, for a part 2 next week. We're going to get more into, and I really wanted to dedicate this full hour to just sort of laying the framework, laying the groundwork, and laying to the best of our ability, the how this is happening and why it's happening. And then the next show, we're going to be going into ways to strengthen that energy field, to begin that healing through energy. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Qigong, of which you know a little bit about, I'd say. So I invite you to come back the following week with my part 2 with Jason Quitt. But in the meantime, we're not done today yet, because we're going, you know where we're going. We're going to the Patreon after show. We're going next door, doors open, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, one of Jason's favorite subjects, and it's related. We're going to be talking about crystals. Let me show you. Crystals. There's my Herkimer diamond, everybody. Crystals that we may be able to use not as a cure-all. That's not what we're talking about. This conversation was way too deep to say, put this crystal under your bed or pillow and it's over. But we will be talking about how these beautiful conscious entities can help us on that journey, on our way, as we're doing the work for ourselves. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the after show. So I do hope you'll join us, and it's a great way to support higher journeys. So on that, my friend, I'm going to say goodbye. You don't go anywhere, because we got another little gig to do. But Jason, thank you so much. And we're looking forward to part 2 next week. So make sure you stay close to Higher Journeys. Be sure to subscribe, please, because you know the deal. Subscribe, hit like, notification bell. And I'm told that some folks aren't getting the notifications, but take a chance, hit the notification bell so you make sure if you get the message when we've uploaded our part 2 with Jason Quitt. In the meantime, thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this really, really heavy, really important conversation on Higher Journeys. We love you all. Talk to you soon.